All right, well, looks like we have a little typography issue there. I thought the fonts were embedded. I guess they weren't. All right. Well, who can figure out what this is, I guess, is the first question. So the title of my presentation is How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Digital Distribution. And for those of you who are Strangelove or Stanley Kubrick fans, you may recognize the image here. Anyway, let's move on to the next slide, since that's kind of abstract at this point. Oh, I guess I have the clicker, don't I? Yeah, OK. OK, so my name is Chris Anderson. As Chris already mentioned, I was hired in 2004 to launch IGN's direct-to-drive service. At that point, IGN did not have any kind of a digital distribution strategy other than File Planet, which is essentially free downloads. So I figured, hey, we got an idea here to sell these things. We already have the infrastructure in place to deliver, gigabyte-size files. Let's try to monetize this and see what happens. We have the audience. Makes a lot of sense. So I did that in 2004 and managed it for 4 years until 2008. Today, I am VP of Product at GameStreamer. And GameStreamer is a digital distribution company as well. It's more on the platform side as opposed to the direct-to-consumer side. We are building solutions, digital distribution solutions that can be white-labeled for major brands or telcos or whoever. And we do traditional digital distribution, that is the download-to-own model, but we also do some of the newer stuff, which I'm going to talk about today, which is cloud distribution and streaming and this type of stuff. The last couple of years have been really interesting, last year in particular. And really shocking to me, because when we started direct-to-drive, there was no tracking whatsoever of sales, digital distribution sales, and NPD. But last year, digital actually pretty much reached parity in terms of unit sales in the PC market with physical retail. And this is, so you think about this, this is just a little over 5 years that it's taken the PC market to get to about 50-50 in terms of digital distribution and physical. So it's really quite a remarkable statistic, in my opinion. And I think you continue that trend out. We'll talk about where we see that sort of going. The other thing that really blew me away was this year that Xbox Live, which is probably the best known and most successful sort of console digital distribution system, cracked the $1 billion mark in terms of overall gross revenues this year. And probably by estimates is going to end up around the $1.2 billion mark. You break that down, about 600 million of that came from subscription revenue. But what's really interesting / exciting from a digital distribution standpoint is that for the first time since Xbox Live launched, digital sales exceeded the revenue from subscription for the first time since they launched. So that is all the game buys and movie buys and other things like that are accounted for more than the subscription fees. So that's huge. That's what you want to see as somebody who's in the digital distribution game, because that means that people are becoming increasingly comfortable with buying content in this format. It was up from about $800 million in the previous year, and arcade, which is obviously the game portion of Xbox Live, is up about 40% by most estimates over 2009. So very, very strong, consistent, solid movement, and obviously very high average gross margins. In addition to all this, so those two previous examples were sort of what I call the traditional digital distribution, if you can call something that's 5 years old, traditional. But what I mean by that is that it's essentially the digital version of the physical world. In other words, I go to the store normally, buy a game, bring it home, stick it in the drive, install it. Direct-to-drive and Xbox Live at this point, for the most part, leaving out Netflix, is that exact same process, only digital. You're moving bits from the server onto your hard drive and installing it. What's really exciting this year is that we've got these new companies like OnLive and Gaikai and GameStreamer that have this cloud distribution technology, which is taking it one step further in terms of convenience to the end user and just really minimizing the friction between the end consumer and what they want in the games that they want to play. So for those of you that may not be familiar with this technology, it basically means that all of the processing for the games happen on a server, over in a server farm somewhere in the cloud. You just get the video down over a broadband connection, and the mouse clicks and button presses and things like that get sent back up. So it means you can literally start playing the game within a second or two. It's really instant. There's no installation locally whatsoever. It also means that you can play cross-platform. You can play an Xbox game on your Mac laptop and stuff like that. And obviously both PC and console games. So it's an extremely exciting technology. There's a lot of debate going on right now about latency and whether or not that things will ever get to the point where it can be a viable alternative for hardcore gamers. My personal opinion on this is that it is by far the most disruptive and exciting development that's happened in digital distribution since digital distribution started. And I really view it as a matter of time before this is the way that the majority of people access their game content, because it's simply so easy and so fast and so instantaneous to just access this content where you want it. People that grew up in my generation and in previous generations have I have less of an attachment to physical than people that were older than me. When I started direct to drive, there's a lot of people that were saying, yeah, it's weird, I like to have the box with the manual and everything like that. And that's just not, I mean, as the generations move on and stuff like that, that's not even a factor. And the whole idea of, well, it's in the cloud, I don't have the disk, I can't do it, whatever, that's also just going to go, I think. People are just, it's going to be too easy, it's going to be too fast and too friction-free, and you're going to just have access to this enormous library of stuff that is just going to be the way that things go. I think the question is at how long is it going to take, and who's going to be the people that end up doing it. May not be OnLive, it may be somebody else. But I've played with OnLive, and it's much better than I thought that it was going to be. There's definite issues with the amount of detail that's in the games. Like if you play a nice high-resolution game like, I don't know, like Batman Arkham Asylum or something like that, you can definitely tell there's a lack of, it's a little bit fuzzier than you're used to seeing on like a really sharp, big screen. But again, that's a bandwidth and compression issue. And so when those things get better, that also gets better. The other major development is that out of left field here in the last couple of years, the iOS, Apple's portable operating system, has entered into the market. And while it was sort of poo-pooed in the beginning by a lot of the serious gaming companies, they're taking it very seriously. Now, this was the iPhone OS share of portable game software sales in 2008. And this was the iPhone OS share of portable game software sales in 2009. And they're not stopping with iPhones and iPads. There's, by all reasonable estimates, there's going to be a television announcement probably in September where you're going to have a version of the iOS on the next version of the Apple TV. And you're suddenly going to have these apps, not only for versions for your iPhone and iPad, but you're going to have another version for your big screen television. And the way that this is going, you're going to have controls you'll be able to control the iOS applications or games on the screen, potentially with your iPad or your iPhone. So there's all kinds of ways for Apple to leverage the popularity of the portable devices that they're already kicking butt with in this entirely new format. So there's also a very interesting development in digital distribution. So sort of processing all this stuff here, you say, well, what does this mean? What does all this mean? And I really think that this means that we are really on the verge of entering into a completely different phase in digital distribution. I think that and I'm going to explain this here a little bit. So in the beginning, as we already established, if I wanted to go get games, I would go to the physical retail store and get those games. And what happened was some innovative companies came along. Steam was the first one. Direct to Drive followed shortly thereafter. And then after that, we had like GOG.com and some of these other games that sort of filled in some of the niches in the digital distribution space, popped up and said, hey, we can use this web thing, to deliver some of this content. So cool, what happened was people started, because it was more convenient and they didn't have to go to the store and these other types of things, they started getting their games from these guys, and that obviously took a chunk out of physical retail, as we've already seen in the statistics. Well, what's happening now, I believe, and there's a really good article recently that I guess there's a lot of controversy and debate going on about, but another Chris Anderson, who I frequently get asked if I am, editor of Wired magazine, wrote the long tail and these types of things, wrote an article a couple weeks ago called "The Web is Dead, Long Live the Internet." And basically what he meant by that is that there's an entirely new level of apps and specific devices that are fine-tuned or custom-tailored to run those apps that are starting to populate a layer above the web. So the web is this great sort of endless ocean of content and possibility and stuff like that, but it requires you to go in, type addresses, this type of thing. It's this sort of wide open space. And what is happening is with these, starting with the iPhone, and now Xbox Live is going to be on the new Windows 7 phone. You've got Xbox Live, you've got the PlayStation Network, and now you've got these other sort of on-live. There's a layer being filled in above the web that is going to turn the web into merely a transportation medium or a channel for content to go into iPhones and Windows 7 phones and Xbox Live. So these devices and applications, and I would put Steam, in that same category because it resides on your desktop as opposed to making you go out onto the web. These are going to increasingly take up the share of time that you used to spend going out on the web, and it does that because these are more convenient, they're faster. In some cases, that's right there in your pocket. So instead of going online to find a restaurant, you go to Yelp, your app on Yelp and stuff like that. So it's not just in the gaming space, it's also in just the way that we interact with what used to be the web, and is now becoming an ecosystem of applications and devices that is going to sit on top of that and take an increasing share of your time. So I think that's why you're seeing all of these companies just piling in, Google is included in this, into this level above, because